As a matter of fact, this is going to be the last set of miracles that we look at for a little while, because over the last number of weeks, even last number of months, you could say, we've been examining Jesus' miracles. And not all of his miracles necessarily, but what we have seen in Luke and in Mark especially, but even in Matthew, there is a certain set of miracles that are all grouped together. In Mark and in Luke, both of the authors here present these miracles one after the other, after the other, after the other. And they are all presented in a similar section in Matthew. It is broken up a little bit, though. But what's curious to me as we look at this is we've seen the miracle where Jesus demonstrates his power over the natural realm. What was the miracle where he did that?
Right? Fish.
Okay, we haven't gotten there. We haven't quite gotten that far yet. And which miracle did we study recently where Jesus displayed his power over the natural realm of things? Yeah, the calming of the sea. That's where he displayed his power over the natural world. And he also displayed his power over the supernatural world or the spiritual world. And what was the miracle where he demonstrates his power in that way? Yeah, the casting out of the demons, right? Of the demoniac of the Gadarenes is how it's known, and that's where Jesus did that. Now, coming right after that, he demonstrated his power not only over those things, but also over sickness. So who can remind me, what is the miracle where he shows his power over sickness? Okay, yes, we've seen him healing lepers. We've seen that even in his earlier ministry, going back into the earlier chapters of Matthew. Yes, he's healed lepers. But in this series of miracles that we've been studying, found in Mark chapter 5, how does he display his power over sickness? Okay, very good. So with the woman of the issue of blood, she had been sick with this bleeding issue, this hemorrhage issue for 12 years, and Jesus healed her when she reached out and touched him. While all that was going on, they were actually on the way to a man named Jairus' house, and while all that was happening, his daughter died. So Jesus was on his way to heal her. She died, and Jesus then displays his power over death by raising her from the dead, right? So in these four miracles, which again in Luke and Mark, they're back to back to back to back, Jesus is displaying his power over the natural world, the supernatural world, sickness, and even death itself. And we've walked through all of these different miracles now in detail, looking at them. And this brings us really to the end of this section on Jesus' miracles. But there's one or two other miracles that I want to include because they're included in Matthew. I mentioned earlier, Matthew groups these things a little bit differently, but if you look somewhere starting in Matthew chapter 8, all the way down through Matthew chapter 9, we do still have the same presentation of all of these same miracles. The calming of the sea, the demoniac, the woman with the issue of blood, Jairus' daughter. All four of those stories are found in this section of Matthew, but Matthew also breaks it up and includes a few other things that the other authors don't. One of the things that Matthew includes at the end of this section of Jesus' miracles are these two little ones that we're going to be studying tonight. And so tonight what we're going to be looking at is Matthew chapter 9, verses 27 through 34. And so with that being said as an introduction, let's go ahead and read our text, and then we'll get into it. So if somebody will read verses 27 through 31.
As Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he entered the house, the blind men approached him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I can do this?" They said to him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "Let it be done for you according to your faith." And their eyes were opened. And Jesus warned them sternly, "Be sure that no one finds out." They went out and spread the news about him throughout the whole area.
Okay, and can we pick up now and read verses 32 through 34?
And as they were going out, behold, a dumb man, demon-possessed, was brought to him. And after the demon was cast out, the dumb man spoke. And the multitudes marveled, saying, "Nothing like this was ever seen in Israel." But the Pharisees were saying, he cast out the demons by the ruler of the demons.
Okay, so this is the little story that Matthew includes at the end of his section on Christ and his miracles. And I think this is an incredibly important section for us. And I think it's really good, actually, to round out the miracle. I think I understand why Matthew may have included this story. And I'm excited to look at it. Here's what I'd like to do this evening. I want to kind of present the big idea and then walk through this story in detail, just as we did the other ones, and then at the end look at a few interpretations, basically the same way we've approached every one of these miracle stories. We're going to do the same thing tonight. But here's my big idea. When I read this, this is the idea that really sticks with me. It's basically this. In light of Christ's total demonstration of his divine power, like everything we discussed, the natural world, the supernatural world, sickness, death, he's demonstrating his divine power. And in light of that, we see two different responses. We see one response which comes from, the blind men, the blind masses, you could say. You could say these two blind men, in a sense, represent the blind and ignorant masses. And the blind and ignorant masses accept Christ as the Messiah. They believe that he's the Son of David. They cry out to him for mercy. And this is the way that Christ is being received by one group of people. But we also see in this story that there's another group of people, and that would be the religious leaders in particular. And in light of his total demonstration of divinity, of his divine godlike power, while this side embraces him as the Son of David, the religious rejectors are opposing him and rejecting him completely. They're saying, all of this stuff he does, all of these divine miracles that we've just seen, the sea, the demoniac, all of it, he all does it in the power of Satan. And we've examined this charge that they brought against him earlier when we were studying through Mark. We've seen this ongoing conflict that Christ has with the religious leaders. But here, what we're really seeing is the way that Christ was received by two different groups of people. You have the blind, and then you who have sight to see, which is interesting. And then you have those who are the learned. They're supposed to have sight to see, but they themselves are actually blind. And so that's the story that we're getting today. And I want to get into it in detail, but that's really what I see when I look at this story. I'll stop here. Are there any questions, any thoughts, any comments so far? Go ahead.
I have heard that the rabbinical tradition was, before Jesus came, they were used to the priests and such being able to cast out demons, but they had to name it first to name it and tell it to go. They said when the Messiah will come, he will not need their name. The guy was mute. He couldn't say, so the demons couldn't be used. They couldn't get the demon's name, but he cast it out anyway, which was one of their sayings was going to be the sign of the Messiah, but he did something the Pharisees couldn't duplicate.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting, yeah.
Kind of makes sense when Jesus asked, who was it? He said, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion."
Yeah.
But the thing is that Jesus even asked, "What was your name?" If he had power over the demons, get out.
That is interesting. That's very interesting. And there was definitely a strong exorcist tradition in the Jewish world. That there is a very strong element of that. So yeah, that's very interesting though. Good. Anything else? Well, let's kind of get into it and look at the details. So I've kind of presented to you what I'm seeing when I look at this, and let's look at some of the details. So it begins in verse 27, and it says, "When Jesus departed," and this is immediately after he raised the dead girl to life. So if you back up, that's the story that they just told in Matthew. It says that he departed from this place in verse 27, and there were two blind men that followed him, and they were crying something out. What was it that they were crying out? Okay, Son of David, have mercy on us. Now, I want to talk about this idea of the Son of David. And while we do it, let's turn back into the Old Testament to 2 Samuel. Because this title, what we're going to see is this title, Son of David, is in fact a title, 2 Samuel chapter 7. And it was a messianic title, which was understood to apply to a certain ruler from the house and from the lineage of David. And the reason why this was significant, the reason why this is something that the people would call Jesus, is because there was a prophecy that was spoken to David back in the Old Testament, and that's what we're going to read right now. So this is where this idea of the Son of David comes from. We're looking at 2 Samuel chapter 7. And we want to read verses 12 through 16 of 2 Samuel chapter 7. Verses 12 through 16.
When your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men. Correct?
To verse 16.
Okay. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from before you, and your house and your kingdom shall be established forever. Before you, your throne shall be established forever.
Okay. And it says, I should have included verse 17. It says in verse 17, according to all these words and according to this vision, Nathan spoke to David. So Nathan is a prophet, and this was a prophecy that the prophet Nathan spoke to King David. And look at the content of this prophecy. He tells him that after you are dead, there will be a seed which will rise up that proceeds from your own bowels. So this is his offspring. It's talking about a child. And it says that this seed of David, God will establish his kingdom. That this seed of David will build a house for his name. And his kingdom will be established forever. His throne established forever. And it goes on. He says, my mercy will not depart from him, even as it departed from Saul. And then he says, your house and your kingdom will be established forever. Your throne will be forever. And the perpetual ruler here is going to be your son. And so this prophecy was understood by the Jews of old and in Jesus' time as being in reference to the Messiah, the son of David who would come and deliver Israel and have an everlasting kingdom and all of these things. This was understood as a messianic prophecy really from a long, long time ago. And we can turn back to Matthew chapter 9. And the people at this time, remember, at the time that Jesus lived, the Jewish people were expecting their Messiah. They were looking for the Messiah. They were anticipating the Messiah. And so this idea of the Son of David to them did not seem strange. And when they saw Jesus doing all of the things he did, all of the miracles, all of the power that he displayed, it was very normal for the people to say, is this him? Is this the Son of David? Is this the Messiah? Is this the one that we've been waiting for? And this is what we mean when we talk about the Son of David. Now, if you even were to look at Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, it describes Jesus as Jesus, the Son of David, the son of Abraham. And you remember, one of the main purposes of the book of Matthew in general, it seems that, and a lot of scholars and people who study this stuff for a living, they seem to believe that Matthew was written specifically to the Jewish people in order to demonstrate that Jesus is the Messiah, the king in the line of David. This is part of the main purpose why Matthew wrote his letter, his gospel in the first place. And we see right in the very beginning of his letter, Jesus is described as the son of David, the son of Abraham, tying him directly to King David in that lineage, tying him directly to Abraham as a Jew. He's saying not only is Jesus a Jew, but he is also the son of David. He is that messianic king, that figure whom we have been waiting for. So this idea of Jesus being the son of David, I think this is the first time that it's come up in the context of Jesus' ministry, but we did see it all the way back in the genealogy, and we're going to see it again moving forward into the future. So any questions, thoughts, or comments about this idea of the son of David and where that came from? All pretty standard. That's pretty remedial stuff, I think. But we see it here. This is what is going on. This is why he talks to him. He tells him, son of David. And then what does he ask for? He says, have mercy on us. Now, before we even move forward, I don't want to overlook this, and we'll come back to it maybe a little bit in a minute, but you had these two blind men, and they did not see any of the miracles that Jesus performed. Obviously, they're blind. They didn't see the woman be healed. They didn't see the dead girl be raised. They didn't see the demoniac. They didn't see the calming of the winds and the waves. They saw none of that stuff. But I'm sure that they heard about it. And I'm sure that the crowds were buzzing and they heard these things. And they obviously believed them. And they believed that Jesus was the Son of David. And as I was reading this, it just reminded me of something that we read in John 20. After Jesus had been raised from the dead, you remember there was this one disciple named Thomas. And Thomas was like, I will not believe that he is raised from the dead unless I can see him, unless I can touch him. And so Jesus shows up and he's like, come on, stick your hand in my side. You want to feel me? Here I am. And he bows down and he says, okay, I get it. And there's something that Jesus says to Thomas, though. He says, Thomas, you have seen and therefore you believe. But blessed are they who believe without seeing. Blessed are they who believe, and he's talking, of course, about his resurrection. Blessed are they who believe without actually seeing me face to face in the flesh. But just that idea reminded me, a lot of people in the crowd, they were believing because they were seeing the miracles. But blessed are they who believe even though they didn't see. Blessed are these two blind men who believed that Jesus was the Son of Man, even though they couldn't see him, even though they couldn't see these things for themselves. They were still blessed by their faith. So, just an interesting idea. But what did they say? They said, have mercy on us. So, when he says have mercy on us, this is the same term, mercy, that we found in Matthew chapter 5 in the Beatitudes, where Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. So Jesus himself said, happy are the merciful, blessed are the merciful. And now you have these two blind men, and they are crying out to the Son of David himself for mercy. So they're putting Jesus to the test in one sense. They're saying, is Jesus going to practice what he preaches, I guess? He said, blessed are the merciful. They're saying, Son of David, have mercy on us. And let's see how Jesus responds. He responds in verse 28. And what does Jesus say to them?
You believe that I can do this?
It's an interesting question. Why do we think he asked them that? And there's no right or wrong answer here that I'm looking for. I'm just curious to hear what the room thinks.
Testing their faith.
Okay. Testing their faith. Maybe giving them an opportunity to profess their faith. It seems like Jesus does that a lot throughout the Gospels. He doesn't always, request or seek out people to profess their faith or whatever. Sometimes he just does miracles without any expression of faith. But there are several stories where he gives people an opportunity to express their faith. That seems to be something that's going on here. Any other ideas?
Because they already knew, because they've been following him, that he could do miracles like that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, I don't mind, I'm saying I don't mind, but it didn't seem right where he would ask them because they've already been following him and they wanted to be healed.
Yeah.
So maybe he was trying to get them to know who he was.
Yeah, that's really good you're saying that. It makes me think about maybe there is a connection back here to what they were greeting him with when they were saying, Son of David, Son of David. Because remember, that's a messianic title. And so these people are basically saying, Jesus, you're the Messiah, help me. And so maybe Jesus, hearing that profession of faith that he is the Son of David, maybe he's coming to them and he's saying, do you believe that the Messiah can do this? Do you believe that this is what the Messiah has come to do? Do you believe that I am him and I'm able to do these things? Because we can read in the Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah, especially in Isaiah, and we can see all of the things that accompany him. It talks about how when the Messiah comes, there will be healing and there will be deliverance and there will be all of these great and awesome things that Jesus fulfills in his earthly ministry. It's happening right in front of these people. And so there was this idea that the Messiah would be doing these things. And so, maybe Jesus is giving them a chance to maybe inquire, what do you mean when you say Son of David? Who do you think I am? Do you believe I can do this? Something there. Any other thoughts?
I'm noticing here and several other places, he's like, according to your faith, let it be done.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like the friend, the paralyzed guy. It was his friend's faith. It's like, we're going to dig up this roof and drop him in Jesus' lap.
Yeah.
And it was the faith and the determination of the friends. But I've also heard a preacher say that, well, if you're praying and God isn't answering, it's because you don't have enough faith and it's your fault. And I know that's not right either. This is something I'm still trying to understand.
Well, he also says if you have faith that's a mustard seed, So that means if you have any faith, he can work with you. So that's called word of faith. You get into that stuff, and it's
Yeah, it kind of messed up a friend of mine. She thought that
oh yeah, it's
she
awful.
had people in her family who were dying. They were like in their 60s and 70s with heart attacks, and she thought it was her lack of faith was why they were dying, because her prayers didn't get answered.
questions even your salvation when that happens.
Well, and the thing, connecting kind of back to this idea, and this is really interesting because the story we're reading tonight kind of refutes a lot of that idea in and of itself, that, our prayers are answered or not answered based on the degree of faith that we have, or miracles happen in our life based on that, because Jesus healed these two men, and they had great faith, and they professed their faith, but the very next part of the story, they bring somebody to him, and Jesus doesn't say anything about faith at all, but he still delivers that man. He still casts the demon out of him. He still makes that man completely whole, and it doesn't say anything before or after about that man or his faith. Christ still worked in his life without any reference to that at all. And so, that's just an interesting... It's interesting how this story puts those two things side by side, one with reference to people's faith, the other without reference to faith. And we see that Christ is working a miracle for both people, those who had the faith and those who didn't express faith. So that is interesting to see.
There's also, I don't remember which one of the Gospels, but Jesus asked, "Do you have faith?" And the guy says, "I do. Oh Lord, help me in my unbelief." He wanted to have more faith.
Yeah.
And he asked for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why did you tell him not to tell him about it? He knew that they were going to do that.
Yeah, so that's, and we'll come and talk about that a little more in detail in a second, but this is not the first time we've seen that, right? We've seen this over and over. In fact, he said the exact same thing to Jairus in the previous story. He told them also, don't tell anybody. Why is it that Jesus repeatedly, especially while he was ministering in Israel, why was he always telling people early on in his ministry not to say anything about these things?
A couple of reasons.
Okay, what's one of them?
He asked the question, do you believe that I'm able to do this? To make the two blind men, their faith maybe, hidden from anyone around them. And because obviously they were known, they probably said it, as beggars. But then for them to publicly state that just brought just bubbled their faith up to the surface so that everybody and anybody that knew them knew what they were all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So he was able, the major accepted term is that so it wouldn't hinder him spreading the gospel. There would be too many people. I disagree with that one, because the reason why people came to him is because they heard of other people. I think there might be a little thing there. He knew these people could hold it in. I mean, they wanted to jump to the ceiling,
If that was his plan, it didn't work out very good, did it? Because he was still thronged by the crowds everywhere he
Shout
went.
it from the rooftop.
Yeah. A lot of people call this idea the messianic secret. And the basic idea is that Christ still had a lot of work to do on earth. And we mentioned earlier that there was a great anticipation for the Messiah. Everybody was eager for the Messiah. And the idea is basically that if everybody in Israel believed that Christ was the Messiah before the appropriate time or not, before the right time, that it would kind of ruin everything. And so there's a story in John, and this I always think about it when I think about this question, where it says that Jesus withdrew himself from the crowds because they wanted to make him king. They were ready to crown him as king, and he said, "No, it's not my time," and he withdrew away from the crowds. And the basic idea that most people think the reason why he's constantly doing this early in his ministry is because he doesn't really want the news that the Messiah is here to spread and to cause some sort of crazy rebellion or to just kind of foul up the eternal plan that was there. So it really, I think the effort was to kind of keep things on the low, but it didn't really ever work out that way. Because it seems like every time it says in the scripture that Jesus commanded them to say nothing, they immediately would go out and just tell everybody. So it doesn't seem like that plan really worked out all that great for him. Interesting, though, we noticed this when we looked at the demoniac. He did not tell that to the demoniac, who was a Gentile in Gentile country. In fact, he told the Gentile in Gentile country to tell everybody about what God had done for him. And so there's a different response that he gave to that person than he's giving to these Jewish people. And I think it's connected to this idea of the Messiah. He just didn't want his cover to be blown, if I could say such a thing.
How can you, something like that happen, how can you not talk about it?
Yeah, well, that's what we see, right?
That was our media of the day. Word
Yeah.
of mouth.
Right.
I wonder, the Jews had so many reasons to go give an offering to the temple and proclaim things in the temple. If some of this was, yeah, you're going to have to talk about it with your friends and family. If this was kind of a keep it out of the temple and make it official, because there was later when they held him on trial.
Yeah.
And maybe it was for their sake, that it's like, if you don't go announce this to the priest, they won't haul you up for this trial that's going to happen later.
Yeah, that's interesting, yeah.
Because the Pharisees were his worst enemies, I'd say.
Yeah. And we do see Jesus constantly, again, pointing, like if there's a leper or cases like this, he's pointing people to fulfill the law of Moses, to go through the rituals, not only so that they can be whole physically, but so they can be whole socially as well. If you've got the woman with the issue of blood or a leper, they are not only have issues with their physical bodies, but their social life has been wrecked as well. And the only way for them to be fully restored back into the community is to go through the rituals, do the laws, have it be proven by the priest, etc., etc., etc. And so part of it, I think Jesus was very concerned with making sure people were restored back into society even after they were healed. And, he had the conflict with the religious leaders. Maybe some of it is, if they mention it was Jesus, that might interfere with what's going on. So there's like a mercy concern. I had never thought about that. That's an interesting idea, yeah.
I find out maybe part of the answer is he never explains. So if I tell you something, I'll usually tell you the reason why I'm telling you this. Same thing when you correct your child. You tell them it's wrong to do that, but you tell them why.
Yeah.
But Jesus purposely leaves that part out. I think it has to do more with our human nature. He knows, like, I'm going to do this for you, but it's a secret.
Yeah.
And he knows that. Don't tell me
A little reverse psychology, yeah. Maybe he's using a little reverse psychology, trying to get the word to spread a little faster. Yeah, there's a thought. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that either.
But then they'd feel guilty. Jesus does a lot of laughing, but I find we'll get to him.
Verse 35, next verse,
Uh-huh.
it says, Jesus went about all the cities and villages,
Yep.
teaching in the synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people.
Yeah.
So that was never one of the life.
Yep.
You didn't tell them, it just, I want certain people.
Spread exponentially.
Yeah, it's spread everywhere. And of course, it was already common knowledge. That's why when he got there, there was thousands of people surrounding him, pressing in on him everywhere he went. Like the word had already spread. Everybody already knew. So yeah, it is interesting to think a little bit about that. Kind of shifting back to where we were, I notice it says, Jesus says, "Do you believe that I can do this?" And then they respond by saying, "Yeah, I do believe you can do this." And so Jesus, it says, touches their eyes in verse 29 and says, "According to your faith, let it be unto you." And we kind of talked about this already, but it's interesting that he doesn't say like, okay, your eyes are healed. It's basically like whatever it is that you're believing for, that's what you're going to get. It's an interesting thing. Okay, you believe that I can heal you? All right, according to your faith. You believe that I can save your eternal soul? Okay, be it according to your faith. And there's just something interesting there about the way he expresses that. Okay, you believe? Then this is what your faith gets you. Any thoughts or questions about that? Go ahead.
I read a little story on, sometimes there's some that, it's just stuff going around the internet. This one was before the internet, and it kind of rang true. It was back out in the west somewhere. They were having a drought, and the preacher got up and prayed, Lord, please, we could use just a little rain. Just please, Lord, help us out. Just send a little rain. And that's what they got, a little rain. And it was an old woman who was telling about this and going, I wish the man had had enough faith to ask for a real good rain.
Yeah, bring a big rain.
And I wonder sometimes if we limit God because we just can't imagine he'd do that for us.
Yeah.
Or he just couldn't do that right here or right now or whatever.
Well, remember what James says in his letter. He tells us, you're reminded, he says, you have not because you ask not. And he says, when you do ask, you ask amiss so that you can spend it on your lusts or whatever. He's saying the reason why you don't have the things you think you need, first of all, because you're not asking for them, specifically wisdom in that context. But we have not because we ask not. And then even if we are asking, sometimes people say, well, I am asking. And sometimes the problem is we're asking with ill intentions. I can remember praying for things that I wanted, and it's like I didn't receive those things, but I can look back on it now and say, well, I'm glad I didn't receive those things because I wouldn't have even known what to do with it if I had it. Like my mind wasn't in the right place. Like you have not because you ask not, and when you do ask, you ask amiss. Like I have lived that out in my own life, and one of the things I'm most grateful for is unanswered prayers, to be honest, because I've prayed a lot of really stupid things in my day. So the Lord not answering some of my prayers is some of the best praise reports I've ever had. Yeah, anyway. Any other thoughts, questions? Go ahead.
My question is, why did Jesus heal?
What's that?
Was it to prove that he was the Messiah? Or was it to give after the fact, once they were healed, to realize they had to be supernatural and he must have been the Messiah?
Yeah.
The whole purpose of him healing to prove them, it doesn't answer that, but it all points back to he had to have been the Messiah.
Yeah. Well, and again, these were people, remember, who they believed that he was the Messiah. They understood the kind of things that the Messiah would do. Jesus even tests their faith, and they apparently passed the test.
They didn't know any of this stuff. He still
Right.
healed them, and then after the fact,
Yeah.
it had to be the Messiah. That's when they became educated and realized it's supernatural.
Yeah, and it seems, and in fact, I wrote this down, and I'll just say it because I think it kind of correlates here. Jesus, they say that, and then it says their eyes were opened, and I wrote this down. I said, though they were blind, yet they still saw the Christ. These were two blind men, but they saw the Christ. And in seeing the Christ, they were given sight. And I should have looked this up and found out exactly where it was, but I'm reminded of another place in the Gospels where Jesus, I believe he's talking to the Pharisees, and he says, like, it would be better for you if you were blind. The fact that you can see is actually working against you because I've come to heal the blind. If you were blind, then I could actually help you and I could save you. But since you're whole, there's nothing I can do for you. And this is the kind of attitude that Jesus brings to them and that they bring to him. Jesus is saying, look, it would be better for you if you were blind. And the truth is, sometimes it would be better for us to be blind because Jesus came to heal the blind. And so those who think that they see, they are the ones who have their eyes blinded in the Gospels. But it's those who we look at, like the ignorant masses of the people, we think, oh, it's the blind masses, what do they know? But it's often those blind, ignorant masses who actually are given sight to see that Jesus is the Christ. I'm reminded of what Paul says, not many among you were noble, not many among you were wealthy, not many among you are great people in the eyes of the world, but God uses the weak to shame the strong. He uses those things that are base to shame those things which are exalted. That's just kind of the way that God operates. And so we have these two blind men, yet these two blind men had more sight than the religious leaders. These two blind men were able to see more than the educated and the learned. And because they could see, they were given their sight. And I think there's something very beautiful about that.
They realized they had a need.
Yeah.
The Pharisees were like, we're the best, we don't need you.
Right. And it's like he said in something we've already studied, right? I did not come, or what did he say? He said, the whole don't need a physician, but it's the sick, right? And I have come to be a physician. Those who are sick, those who are infirm, those who are blind, those who are in need are actually in a good position because Jesus came for those kind of people. So if you find yourself sick and broken and in need of healing or whatever it may be, you're actually in a really good position because those are the kind of people that Jesus came to minister to in the first place. Those who have it all together, those who can see, those who are so wise, those who have all the knowledge, those are the people who most often are actually blinded to the truth of what Christ has come to accomplish. And honestly, we can see this playing out even still to this very day. Like, if you want to find a den of unbelief, what you need to do is go to like the best seminaries that are in the country. If you want to find a den of unbelief, just go study at a Bible college for a while, because all of the professors at these great, high, prestigious seminaries, half of them don't even believe that God exists. So there's like this tendency when we raise up in our learning, when we raise up in position, we become blinded to the things of God in some sense. That happened back then. It's happening today. This is a trend that we can see all throughout history. Any thoughts or comments about where we've been so far? So this is a miracle of Jesus healing these two blind men. And then we talked a little bit about how he told them, don't tell anybody. But of course, what do? They go out and they spread it, right? They go out, they spread the fame of it abroad. What does it say? Yeah, they spread abroad his fame and all of that country. And then we pick up in verse 32. And look at what he says in verse 32. It says, as they went out, behold, they brought to him a dumb man possessed with a devil. Now, a couple things. First of all, notice it's these same two guys. It's these same blind people. When they went out, they came back, and they brought with them a dumb man, it says. Now, I think we all know this, but I'm just going to point it out anyway. A dumb person does not mean like they're stupid. It means that they cannot speak. So I'm pretty sure everybody knows that, but the way that it reads when you read it, it's kind of funny. Like, they brought him this dumb man who's not able to talk. It's like, we don't have to be rude. You could just say he doesn't know how to talk, But that's what it means. A dumb person is a person who can't talk. And so these two healed blind men, they bring their friend, their mute friend, and it says here that he is possessed of a devil. And what's interesting to me is that Jesus is able to discern the difference between somebody who has a medical condition of blindness and somebody who has demonic possession. And he is able to address the issue where the issue actually lies. For the blind men, he restored the physical, mechanical issue that prevented them from being able to see. For the mute man, he cast out the devil that was preventing the man from being able to speak. And Jesus didn't have to run tests. He didn't have to do an interview. He just immediately understood what the problem was, and he fixed the problem. You see, he had this discernment of spirits, you could say, where he was able to recognize these people need to be healed in their body. This guy needs a devil cast out of him. And the truth is that none of us have that level of discernment. The only way that you and I could have that kind of discernment is because it is a gift of the Holy Spirit. One of the gifts of the Spirit is the discernment of spirits, but in our own power, in our own flesh, in our own ability, we cannot discern what is a medical issue and what is a demon issue. We talked a lot about this when we talked about demons and stuff. A lot of diagnosing the problem oftentimes is beyond our capability unless the Holy Spirit grants us that gift in the moment to discern. It's very difficult for us to know what's really going on under the surface. In fact, so much so that the modern medical industry rejects the idea of demonic possession altogether. We're seeking natural explanations of these things. And honestly, that makes sense. I'm not opposed to that. It makes sense for us to say, like, we got to find the physical thing so we can treat that. Because once again, in our own power and our own ability, not only can we not discern what is demonic, but we actually can't do anything about the demonic either. The only way we have any power over that stuff is in the name of Christ. And so, in the context of the world, we can't really depend on that to be like our primary means of medicine. And so I just want to point out, I think it's interesting how Jesus is able to discern the difference there. And I think it's important that we remember we are not Jesus. That's not to say we can never have that discernment. That's not to say we can, because it is a gift of the Holy Spirit. But in general, we should probably avoid making those kind of judgments. It's probably best for us to avoid making those kind of judgments and to rule everything else out before we start saying this is a demon, that's a demon. We probably should go through a checklist first before we go to that level. We're not Jesus. We don't have perfect discernment. But the Lord can give us a little bit of insight. Any thoughts or questions about that? I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so we see they bring this guy. They talk to him. Jesus actually doesn't say anything to him at all. And what happens? It says in verse 33 that when the devil was cast out, the dumb man spoke, and the multitudes marveled, saying, it has never been so in all of Israel. So here's this deliverance, this exorcism. You have these miracles, the blind can see, the devil's cast out, now the dumb man's talking. What is the response of the crowds?
I think nothing like this was seen in Israel. It may be part of that rabbinic tradition that the rabbis had to call the demon by name, so they had to get the demon to say its name.
Yeah.
And so they could never do this. They could never deal with a mute guy.
Yeah.
Jesus just did.
Yeah, this kind of authority, this kind of power, this kind of thing, this has never been seen. We've never seen anybody do this kind of thing before. And we've already seen in other places that we've studied, what were they saying about Jesus when he spoke, when he taught, like in the synagogues? How did they describe his teaching? What was that?
With authority.
With authority. This man speaks with authority like no one we've ever heard before. Even the demons obey him, remember? So yeah, we've never seen anything like this, adding to that messianic fervor, adding to that expectation. You've got the crowds, the multitudes, and they're like, this is it. He's here. This is the thing. So you have the response of this one group, the rabble-rousers, if you will, the plebs, the commons, the multitudes. But then we also see the response of the other group, and we see that in verse 34. What was the response of the other group?
Yes, devils, to the prince of devils.
Yeah, by the power of devils, by the prince of devils, he casts out devils himself. So the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they were objecting and rejecting Christ, his power, his authority. We've talked about this prince of Beelzebub thing. We've addressed this accusation before, so we're not going to go into depth and in detail with it tonight, other than to say this was like an ongoing accusation. So we read about this earlier in Jesus' ministry. It's coming up now. In fact, it's going to come up again a little bit later in Matthew. So this was like an ongoing accusation that the religious leaders were bringing against Christ. This is how they were trying to cancel him, if you will. This is how they were trying to throw mud on his name so that, they're trying to counter message, if you will. They're trying to counter signal all of this information that's going out about Christ. The multitudes are talking about his miracles. Well, the Pharisees and the religious leaders, they're trying to also spread rumors that he's a demon, that he's possessed, that he's doing all this stuff by the power of Satan. That was their angle. That's what they were trying to do. So
He lets it go until they actually confront him. That's when he says, how can Satan cast out Satan? House divided by itself.
exactly, yeah. And we saw that conflict back in Mark chapter 3 and how Jesus walked through that with them. But yeah, this was an ongoing, it appears that this was like the ongoing accusation against Christ. This is one they kept pulling out over and over and over. Over and over. So yeah, that's pretty much the story. And we got a few minutes left, but before we get into a few interpretations here, any thoughts, any questions, any comments on this story? We've seen the big idea, and now we've kind of walked through it verse by verse and looked at a whole bunch of details and pulled some stuff out. Any thoughts, any comments, any questions with where we are so far?
I think that when the Pharisees said that, it's because they couldn't do it. And because they couldn't do it, then it really made them look bad. So
Yeah.
actually, Jesus was.
Right. Yeah.
So that they would maintain their status.
Yeah, that's good.
You would think that would be the more reason for them to believe he's the Messiah. What did that one man ask the Pharisees? He says, since Moses has any of you ever healed a blind man? Or he went through this list of different things. In other words, if you can't believe this guy here, at least he has the evidence to prove who he is. And you're just coming up against him all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that so human though? This guy is more powerful than me, and I don't want to lose power, so let me pull the rug out from under his feet, stab him in the back, and maintain my own power.
Yeah, with somebody with that much power, I would. run and hide. I'm going to try to attack them. That's like trying to beat up her.
But isn't that what Satan does?
Yeah.
Because in verse 33 it says, it was never so seen in Israel. So they were, they were jealous that Jesus was getting all the attention.
Yeah.
And so they had to cut him down.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that for sure. For sure.
In that seeking of position, the pride that the devil, that's what, he went from being the choir director of all of heaven to the devil.
Yeah.
I believe that they were only expecting the Messiah at that time and everything else. There was all this evidence. Even when Jesus read out was Isaiah, and when he was in the temple, and basically said, I am the Messiah, they were expecting, there's a conquering Messiah that was supposed to come, and then there was a sacrificial one that was supposed to come. They didn't realize, that they were two different events. They expected the conquering one to come over and conquer Julius Caesar and all the Romans and everything else. It was their will more than them honoring what the word said.
I wonder if they were like expecting him to go, oh, look,
Trying to
my
force
faithful
God.
servants, you are the best. Let me put you here in charge, second in command to me. And he was like, y'all are a pit of vipers. And they're like,
Yeah.
how dare you say that about us?
Yeah.
Don't treat the king like that.
Very good. Very good. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? What we've seen so far. I do want to offer up a few different ways of interpreting the passage, just like we've done on the other ones. I'm going to pull out our Rubik's Cube, if you will, of interpretation, the 4 different ways. So the first one, looking at this from just kind of a literal interpretation, this is what I wrote. You tell me what you think. I wrote, Jesus Christ, the Son of David, demonstrates his messianic bona fides in healing 2 blind men and loosing the tongue of a demon-possessed mute. So if we're reading this and just kind of big picture, what's actually happening, what's being demonstrated, I view this, much like the other miracles, as a demonstration of Christ's power, as a demonstration that he is the Messiah, as a demonstration that, just of his divine power and that the fact that he is the Messiah. That's kind of a very simple, straightforward way of looking at this, as kind of a literal interpretation. It's just a little more evidence in the column. This is the Son of God. Another way, and honestly, this is kind of the primary way right now that I'm approaching the text and that I've been thinking about it over these last couple of weeks. I've been looking at it, and that is from the spiritual interpretation, or the kind of symbolic, metaphorical interpretation, however you want to think about it. And that's what I mentioned earlier, that we really, in this story, it's illustrated to us 2 different responses to Christ, 2 different responses to his display of godhood. You have one, the blind masses, and they believed that he was the Messiah. They believed that he was the Son of David. And because the blind believed on him, they received their sight. And then you have the religious leaders who are supposed to be able to see. They're supposed to be the ones who know all of this and who recognize the Messiah. But those who had sight, they rejected the Messiah. And because of their rejection, they actually were blinded. So those who had sight were blinded because they rejected the Messiah, but those who were blind were given sight to recognize who he was. This story really, to me, illustrates the 2 different ways that Jesus was responded to in Israel. Any thoughts about that? And then I look at this, also I think about it from like the moral lesson. So what's a couple moral lessons that we can take away from this story? I mentioned one earlier. Blessed are they who, not seeing, do believe. This is like what Jesus said to Thomas. Blessed are they who believe without seeing, right? Same thing with these blind guys. I mentioned this earlier. I won't re-go over it. There's something blessed for us when we believe without seeing. So there's this saying that goes around, seeing is believing. Well, Jesus said that blessed are they who see, or blessed are they who believe without seeing. So that's something that it's important for us to keep in mind. I got another thing here. Those for whom Jesus had done something great, they went out and they brought others back to him. So those 2 blind men, Jesus gave them sight, And what did they do? They didn't just go skipping off to town their merry way, happy. No, they went out and they got some friends, and they brought their friends back to Jesus too. They said, you've got to see this guy. This is what he did for us. We were blind, but now we see. Come and experience him yourself. And I think that we also should kind of have that same attitude. We should also have that attitude. Jesus has done something for me. I want to go share that with others. I want to lead others to him so that they can experience the same blessings that I have experienced in coming to Christ. And then looking at this as kind of a eschatological, how is us all going to be fulfilled kind of in the end time? I wrote this. In the end, every person who cries out to the Son of David for mercy will be fully restored as the glory of Christ is spread to the new heavens and the new earth. So when it's all said and done, when it's all wrapped up, all of us blind beggars who cried out for mercy from the Son of David, we will receive our sight, we will receive full restoration in a restored new creation in a beautiful world filled with the glory of God, crying out for mercy to him. He will show that mercy, and we will all be restored. So these are a few ways that we can interpret this, understand this, see what's going on. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions? Any other interpretations or applications?
Yeah.
Anyone? Go ahead.
I had a wise man told me, he says, the gospel is so simple. All it is a bunch of beggars who were offered some bread. And now they've enjoyed the bread. They're going out telling other beggars where the bread can be found.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Anything else as we wrap up here this evening?
Just that, it's, I guess you could say, examples of human nature. The good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all right here. That's one beautiful thing about what we have in Scripture. One thing I really appreciate about Scripture is that it just kind of tells the story. It doesn't edit out the bad parts. It doesn't edit out the parts that make people look bad. It doesn't edit out the parts that we would prefer for it to edit out maybe sometimes. It just kind of lays it all bare, warts and all. And I think there's something beautiful about that because that's who we are as people. That's what our experience on earth is like. That's what life is. It's a combination of these good experiences and bad experiences, good decisions, bad decisions, virtues and vices, getting things right and getting things wrong. And all of that kind of works together to create the life that we live. And Scripture is faithful to that. Scripture communicates those different things to us. So I think that's kind of cool. Any final closing thoughts here this evening? Well, I hope this was good for everybody. I hope that everybody learned something, maybe approached this passage from a little bit of a different perspective. There's going to be a story very, very similar to this later on in the Gospels about two blind men crying out for mercy to the Son of David, but that's toward the end of Jesus' life. This is one of the early examples of this happening, and that's what we got. So my plan is next week I want to do a little bit of a conclusion on all of these miracles. Since we've spent so much time, I want to kind of wrap it up, put a bow on it, review all the things that we've talked about. After that, we're going to do an introduction to Jesus' parables on the kingdom. And so here in just a couple, 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to start getting into Jesus' parables of the kingdom as they are found in Matthew chapter 13. So we took a little bit of time off from his teaching ministry to look at some of the things he was doing, to look at some of his miracles after we finished the Sermon on the Mount. Well, now we're about to get back into Jesus' teaching, picking up in Matthew chapter 13, looking at his parables concerning the kingdom of God. And that's going to be, we're going to spend quite a bit of time on that. So we're going to get into that series within a series here pretty soon. We're going to wrap this one up first as we continue to make progress through our study of the Gospels. So any questions about that? I hope everybody is enjoying our slow march through the Synoptic Gospels. I hope that it's been enriching to you. It's definitely been enriching to me, and I look forward to continuing to walk through them. Cool. Well, Sister Bobby, will you close with some prayer this evening?